Hey, everybody, and welcome to Your Next, the show where we go beyond the balance sheet and explore what it really takes to build a life of meaning after the exit. I'm your host, Jerome Myers. I help Apex performers navigate the emotional and psychological transitions that no one talks about, the ones that begin when the business card ends. If you've ever looked around after achieving what you thought was your ultimate goal and found yourself feeling unfulfilled, unsure, or even invisible, you're in the right place. Let's get into today's episode. It's another solo show. And we're going to dig into how founder trauma shows up after the exit. You built it, you scaled it, you exited. Everyone congratulated you. They talked about the valuation, the multiples, the freedom, but no one talked about the silence, that weight, the ache in your chest when you realize the thing you spent your life building now runs without you. And suddenly you're asking yourself, what was it all for? Is this really it? And who am I now? Today, we're talking about something no one prepares founders for: the invisible cost of success. I want to introduce you to James. He exited his company about 13 months ago. On paper, it was a dream: an 8-figure exit, full earnout, time freedom. But 6 months post exit, James found himself waking up with chest tightness, struggling to focus, and losing interest in everything, including the hobbies he thought he'd finally have time to enjoy. His relationships were strained, his sleep was wrecked, and he felt guilty for not feeling grateful. James kept saying, I thought the exit would be my liberation. Instead, it feels like my collapse. And that's when I showed him something I'm going to share with you today. It's called the Founder's Trauma Tree. Because here's the truth: the panic attacks, the numbness, the depression, they aren't random. They're not weakness, they're signals, they're symptoms, and they're rooted in something deeper. You see, most Apex performers, especially founders, build from a place of pain they've never had the time or space to process. We think success will heal the wounds, but when the race is over and the noise quiets, the wound starts to speak. And that's what happened to James. And chances are, if you're listening, it will happen to you if it's not already happening. Over the next few minutes, I want to walk you through the trauma tree. Why symptoms like PTSD, anxiety, and addiction are just the leaves, and how an unhealed trauma is the root. Because if you've exited or are planning to, the real journey isn't just financial, it's emotional. It's at the identity level. And the sooner you see that, the sooner you can stop feeling broken and start healing on purpose. Let's go a little deeper. So, what's the founder trauma tree? It's a visual model that we created to explain why so many Apex performers feel blindsided after their exit. Because the truth is, what's visible on the surface is only a fraction of what's really going on. Imagine a tree. The leaves and the branches are above the surface. That's where the symptoms live: PTSD, panic attacks, anxiety, depression, even addiction. Then there are the things everyone sees, or maybe the things you've been trying to hide, but they're not the cause, they're the consequences. What drives them is buried deeper, below the surface. That's where the trauma lives. It's the roots. These roots are made up of things you may not have had words for until now: emotional neglect, early pressure to achieve, betrayal by people you trusted, moments where you celebrated for success, but never saw your pain. You learn to survive by performing, by achieving, by building something big enough to quiet the noise inside. But trauma doesn't disappear just because your company scaled. In fact, when the pressure to perform finally lifts, when you exit, that's when the nervous system finally stops bracing and all of the pain you outran for years catches up. That's why post exit crashes feel so intense. It's not just about the business, it's about everything that the business helped you avoid feeling. Now let's break it down like this. The leaves are what you feel, the stress, the reactivism, the disconnection. The branches are the behaviors, control, isolation, overthinking, addiction. The trunk is your identity, the part of you that was built around being the founder. The roots are the trauma, the unprocessed pain that shape your coping strategies. And the soul, that's your nervous system, the environment everything grows from. If the soil is in dysregulation, if the roots are tangled with unresolved memories, then it makes sense that everything above ground feels unstable. You didn't create the tree on purpose, but you can prune it, you can replant it, and most importantly, you can grow something new. But it starts with telling the truth that your exit may have been the most traumatic experience of your life. Not because the deal was bad, but because the identity it unraveled was built on unacknowledged pain. And if that's you, you're not weak, you're waking up. In part three, we're going to explore what most founders get wrong when they try to feel better. Because distraction isn't healing, control isn't calm, and busy doesn't mean better. Let's talk about it. So let's talk about where most founders go wrong. When the symptoms start, the anxiety and the restlessness, the late night spirals, most expert performers don't call it trauma. They call it a rough patch. They say they just need a new project, a new investment, a new calendar full of meetings. That will make them feel important again. That'll make them feel whole, right? Because that's what they've always done. Solve the feeling by solving a problem. But here's the paradox. This isn't a problem you can outwork, outsource, or even outperform. What you're feeling isn't failure, it's feedback. And the most dangerous thing a founder can do post-exit is mistake a trauma response for a personality trait. You're not just wired this way. You're not just wired to drive or just be intense or just be busy until you're better. That's the story you built around the womb. And that story made you successful. But now it's suffocating you. Here's what most founders try. They fill their schedule to avoid sitting still. They chase the next deal, hoping excitement will replace the emptiness. They throw money at causes, hoping contribution will feel like purpose. Or they isolate because nobody in the circle understands what they're going through. All of this makes sense. It's how you survived. But survival isn't the goal anymore. You made it. The question now is, can you feel it? Healing isn't about fixing something broken. It's about making space for the version of you that never got to emerge. The version that isn't addicted to achievement. The version that knows peace is more powerful than pressure. And I want to say this clearly. If you haven't tried therapy, if you've tried therapy and it didn't land, if you've journaled, meditated, worked with coaches and still feel stuck, you're not doing it wrong. They're just not helping you address the root. It's not theoretical, it's personal. And I'll show you how James did it step by step. So how do you go from trauma to healing? From reacting to rebuilding, from chasing to choosing? That's what James had to figure out. And it's what so many founders are starting to realize. That exiting the business was only the beginning of their transformation. When James first saw this trauma tree, it gave him a name for everything he'd been feeling. But what changed his life was realizing a new tree could grow in its place. We call it the healing tree. Imagine this. The soil is emotional safety. The roots are reprocessed memories, stories that no longer control you. The trunk is emotional integration, learning how to feel without fragmenting. The branches are alignment, relationships, work, and routines that nourish instead of drain. And the leaves, their legacy and joy. This isn't about becoming someone new, it's about becoming someone true. Here's what that looked like for James. He stopped trying to outthink his pain and started learning to feel it. He revisited the stories he buried, but this time with tools, not shame. He regulated his nervous system. He redefined success. He reclaimed his voice, not just as a founder, but as a father, a husband, a man. And something beautiful happened. His anxiety softened, his relationships deepened, his impact expanded, not because he pushed harder, but because he finally felt whole. That's what the healing tree makes possible. If you're listening and realizing you've been stuck in the trauma tree, you're not alone. You don't need another venture. You need a vision for your healing. And that's what the NEO assessment and our transition frameworks are designed to help you uncover. Because the exit isn't the end, it's a portal to a new beginning. And what's waiting for you on the other side isn't burnout or boredom. It's peace, it's purpose, it's power rooted in something real. There's a moment I see over and over again in the founders we work with, and I've lived it myself. It's the moment when you realize that exit you worked so hard for doesn't feel like a win. You hit your number, you got the freedom, but now you have this hollow feeling, this disorientation, this deep and unspeakable sense of loss. We call it the exit founders paradox. Here's the paradox. The thing that was supposed to be the reward, your liberation, often becomes your most disorienting identity crisis. Because when you sell the business, you're not letting go just of a company. You're letting go of a title, your structure, your relevance, your sense of certainty, your default purpose. And when all of that falls off, what's left? If you're like James or like me, you're left with one silent question. Who am I without what I built? That question isn't a flaw in your thinking. It's a reflection on the cost of how you've been living. Most founders are conditioned to attach your identity to output. When you exit, the output stops, and so does the feedback loop that told you you were valuable. That's when the trauma tree starts shaking, because without your company to outrun your past, the pain you buried rises to the surface. And when the pain hits, it often shows up in 6 very specific areas. We call them 6 centers of doubt: self-image, relationship, work, health, prosperity, and significance. If you're digging into self-image, you're asking questions like, am I still someone of value? For relationships, you're asking, do people love me or for what I did? For work, you're asking, what do I do now that matters? Health, why am I exhausted all the time? Prosperity, is the money actually enough to make me feel secure? And significance, will I be remembered for anything that actually matters? When the centers start to wobble, so does your emotional footing. And it's no wonder panic, depression, and anxiety show up. You're standing in success, but drowning in self-doubt. The founder's exit paradox isn't a side effect. It's the real exit. And the sooner we name it, the sooner we can normalize it, because you're not broken, you're becoming. Now, let's talk about what it looks like to start again from the inside out. If you're listening, chances are this is home. Maybe you saw yourself in James. Maybe you felt pressure to pretend everything's fine. Maybe you've tried to outrun the silence with a new venture, a packed calendar, or a glass of something strong. But let me make an offer to you for something different. Not a fix, not a hustle, just an invitation to rebuild from the inside out. This isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Before the pressure, before the trauma, before the title. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that got buried under performance. It's about creating a life where peace isn't a reward for exhaustion. It's the starting point. And you don't have to figure it out alone. At Exit to Excellence, We designed the exit readiness assessment and the next intensive to do one thing: help you reconnect to yourself after the exit. We're not interested in surface level wins. We want to walk with you through the doubt, the disorientation, and into the clarity that comes when you finally stop outsourcing your worth. We help Apex performers like you shift from survival to alignment so that what you build next is rooted in wholeness and not wounds. If any part of you is thinking, I don't know what's next, but it can't be this, then maybe it's time to start the journey you've been avoiding. The one that doesn't start with a pitch deck, but with a pause. I want you to visit exittoexcellence.com to take the NEO assessment so that we can figure out what your post-exit archetype is. This is going to help you make your next chapter the most aligned, authentic version of your success yet. Because healing isn't retreating, it's rising. You didn't just build a company, you built a world. One where you could be seen as successful, powerful, needed. But when the world ends, it doesn't just shake your calendar, it shakes your core. The founder's exit paradox is real, it's emotional, and it's survivable. But only if you choose to walk through it. You're not here by accident. You're here because something in you is ready to stop pretending, ready to stop performing, and ready to start healing. Not because you're broken, but because you're brave enough to build again. Differently this time. Let me leave you with this. Your identity is not your title. Your value is not your valuation. Your worth was never up for negotiation. What comes next isn't about proving yourself. It's about finding yourself. If you're ready to start the journey, we're here. Visit exittoexcellence.com, take the NEO assessment, and begin creating your next chapter with intention, clarity, and peace. Because your dreams should be real. I'll catch you on the next episode.